All right, welcome everyone. Let's go ahead and dive right in. Today we're embarking on a pretty fascinating academic journey through the intricate and honestly sometimes highly dramatic world of Philippine civil law. As your professor for this masterclass explainer, I really want us to think about how these rules, well, they don't just sit collecting dust in textbooks. They actively govern our daily lives, our families, and our most personal disputes. It's the hidden framework of society. So, here's our syllabus for today. We'll be covering jurisdiction and foreign laws, human relations and deceit, the institution of marriage, shifting doctrines on bigamy, protecting the family home, and finally, we'll wrap up with filiation and legitimacy. Section 1. Jurisdiction and foreign laws. Let's look at the rules of the game.
Let me pose a Socratic question to the class. What happens when a foreigner commits an act right here in the Philippines? Whose rules do we actually play by? Well, the general rule is territoriality. Simply put, if you're within Philippine territory, Philippine laws related to public order and safety apply to you. A perfect modern example is the Russian prankster who is detained locally. Territoriality gives the Philippines full jurisdiction over his actions. But, as with all things in law, there are exceptions. The Vienna Convention shields ambassadors and visiting heads of state through diplomatic immunity. And then we have specific international treaties. Think of the pre-1992 U.S. Military Bases Agreement, or the heavily publicized Pemberton case. That case brilliantly illustrates how international agreements can actually shift or even pause local jurisdiction.
Now, things get really interesting when we encounter the Renvoi Doctrine. Imagine an American citizen, let's just call him John Smith, who dies in the Philippines, leaving behind property here. Under Philippine law, succession follows the national law of the deceased, so you'd think U.S. law applies, right? But what if his specific U.S. state law says, no, apply the law of the place where the property is located? It literally refers the matter back to the Philippines. This creates a crazy legal ping-pong effect. To stop this endless back and forth, the Philippine Forum Court will eventually accept the referral and just apply local Philippine law to resolve the estate. That ping-pong effect brilliantly illustrates the divide between intrinsic and extrinsic validity in foreign contracts. Extrinsic validity, meaning the form and the physical solemnities, follows the lex loci celebrationis. That's just a fancy way of saying the law of the place where the contract is signed. So a contract signed in Germany follows German formatting rules. But intrinsic validity, which includes a person's legal capacity to even enter into that contract in the first place, well, that follows their nationality law. So the absolutely crucial takeaway here is this: a Filipino's legal capacity follows them anywhere in the world. If a Filipino winer signs a contract in Hong Kong, they still lack capacity under Philippine law, making that contract voidable, totally regardless of Hong Kong's local rules. Okay, moving to Section 2, Human Relations and Deceit. When broken promises become actionable. Have you ever wondered if a simple broken promise to marry could actually land you in court? I know, it sounds like something from a soap opera. As a general rule, a mere broken engagement is not legally actionable. You can't sue someone just for changing their mind. But Article 19 of the Civil Code lays down the core principles of human relations. If you meet 3 specific steps: 1, you have a legal right; 2, you exercise it in bad faith; and 3, your actual intent is to injure another person, you can be held liable. Basically, you must act with justice and give everyone their due.
This brings us to a frankly fascinating application of these principles: the landmark case of Baksh versus Gonzalez. In this case, an Iranian medical student courted a Filipina, proposed marriage, and even went so far as to seek her parents' consent. But the court found he never actually intended to marry her. Actually, the promise was just a deceptive ploy for sexual exploitation. So, the Supreme Court ruled that while a broken promise to marry isn't actionable per se, when deceit and moral seduction are used to cause moral injury contrary to good customs, well, it crosses a line. That deceit transformed a non-actionable broken engagement into a totally valid claim for moral damages under Article 21.
Let's shift gears to Section 3, the institution of marriage, essential and formal requisites. Under Philippine law, marriage is not merely a contract, it is a constitutionally protected institution with incredibly strict legal requirements. We divide these into essential and formal requisites. Essential requisites are legal capacity, meaning male and female, at least 18 years old, with no legal impediments like being closely related, and consent freely given. Formal requisites include the authority of the solemnizing officer, a valid marriage license, and a ceremony with at least 2 witnesses. The total absence of any of these renders the marriage completely void from the start. Interestingly, though, if you have a validly issued marriage license, it's good anywhere in the Philippines for 120 days. Picture this.
You could get it in Lipa City, travel to a beach in Boracay, and if you happen to run into a Supreme Court justice on vacation, they could validly solemnize your marriage right there in the sand, provided you have that genuine license on hand.
So, who actually has the legal authority to solemnize a marriage? Incumbent judges can do it, but usually only within their court-specific jurisdiction, unless, of course, they sit on an appellate court or the Supreme Court, which gives them nationwide authority. Registered priests and ministers can officiate, provided one party actually belongs to their sect. Mayors can officiate, but only within their own municipalities. And check this out, ship captains and airplane chiefs, they can legally solemnize a marriage, but only in articulo mortis, meaning at the point of death. And a vital note for my students here, this authority does not transfer by succession. An assistant pilot cannot just step in to solemnize a marriage because the chief pilot is busy flying the plane.
Section 4. Shifting Doctrines on Bigamy. The Peludo Doctrine.
Ask yourself this, what happens if you marry a second time only to find out your first marriage was technically void all along? Supreme Court jurisprudence has evolved dramatically on this issue. Under the old Bittencourt rule, if you remarried without a court order, you were guilty of bigamy, even if your first marriage was later proven to be totally void. Then in 1988, Article 40 of the Family Code came along and reinforced that you strictly need a prior judicial declaration of nullity before remarrying. But then, fast forward to 2021, and we see a massive jurisprudential shift with the Pulido Doctrine, a real game changer. The court ruled that bigamy fundamentally requires a first valid marriage. If your first marriage was void ab initio, meaning it was void from the very beginning, there is literally no valid marriage to base a bigamy criminal charge on, even if you didn't get a court declaration first.
The absolutely crucial takeaway here is the real-world remedy this creates. Because jurisprudence is dynamic, this shift in the Pulido case opens the door for individuals who are actually imprisoned for bigamy under those old abandoned doctrines. Remedial law experts suggest that these individuals can now file petitions for habeas corpus to seek exoneration, successfully arguing that their continued detention lacks a valid legal basis today.
Moving on to Section 5, Protecting the Family Home, a shield with limits.
We often hear that the family home is sacred under the law, but does it really provide an absolute, impenetrable shield against creditors? Consider this specific number, 300,000 pesos. The Family Code states that a family home is generally exempt from execution, attachment, or for sale. However, there is a statutory value limit for this exemption. It's capped at 300,000 pesos in urban areas and a mere 200,000 pesos in rural areas, determined at the time it was constituted. Keep in mind these numbers were set way back in 1988. In today's modern real estate reality, these incredibly outdated limits severely test the practical protection the law actually offers to families facing execution proceedings.
And this perfectly illustrates that the family home is definitely not an absolute defense. There are strict exceptions. Your home can absolutely still be seized and sold for non-payment of taxes. It can be executed upon for debts you incurred before the home was legally constituted, or for mortgage debts. And logically speaking, you cannot use the family home shield to avoid paying the very laborers, mechanics, or material suppliers who actually built or provided materials for that exact home.
Our final topic, Section 6, Filiation and Legitimacy, Tracing the Bloodline.
This brings us to what are often the highest stakes in civil law, how the law categorizes children and traces bloodlines. This becomes intensely disputed during estate succession. The law strictly categorizes filiation. Legitimate children are conceived or born during a valid marriage, or even through authorized artificial insemination, and they enjoy full successional rights. For example, Carmina Villarroel's twins were legally presumed legitimate because they were born during her valid, although estranged, marriage to Rustam Padilla. That presumption of legitimacy is incredibly strong. Illegitimate children, born outside of valid marriage, receive a smaller ratio in estate disputes. We're also seeing modern complexities rising up, like children born through surrogacy, which Philippine law currently leaves in a bit of a gray area regarding legitimacy and citizenship.
Now, what about adoption? Well, administrative adoption under Republic Act 11642 legally elevates an adoptee to the exact status of a legitimate child regarding the adopters. But here's the crucial point. This legal fiction does not create collateral kinship. A brilliant example is Senator Grace Poe. As the adopted daughter of Fernando Poe Jr. and Susan Rosas, she legitimately inherited from them. However, under the law, this adoption does not magically make her the legal cousin to Susan Rosas' extended family, like her niece Cheryl Cruz. The legal ties strictly bind only the child and the adopting parents.
Which brings us to our final thought for this masterclass. If our most personal relationships, our marriages, our homes, and our very children are ultimately governed by these strict, shifting legal codes, how well do you truly know the rules of the game? From the ping-pong technicalities of international jurisdiction to the outdated limits on your family home, these civil laws quietly but powerfully dictate the realities of our everyday lives. Jurisprudence is dynamic. It shifts, just as we saw with bigamy. So the next time you sign a contract or witness a marriage, remember the invisible legal framework holding it all together. Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll see you in the next one.